They played the first Grey Cup game back in 1909 in Rosedale Park in Toronto in front of 4,000 spectators. This year, the game will be played 7 subway stops from that original spectacle. It's at the Rogers Centre, and this time more than 50,000 will attend and another 3 million will watch on TV. Joining us now, the man who chronicles a century's worth of Canadian gridiron history. Here's Stephen Brunt, author of 100 Grey Cups, This Is Our Game. And it's great to have you back at TVO.
It's great to be here, the old stomping grounds.
I was going to say, a fixture on Studio 2 for many a Monday over the years, so it's really nice to have you here. Let's start with just the original history of how this cup became this cup. Like Stanley, it's a present from a Governor General. What's the story, though?
Well, it's a great story. It's one of the many stories in this book that I had no idea about until I started delving into the history of it. Earl Grey was indeed a Governor General of Canada after Lord Stanley, one of his successors. An interesting guy, a very kind of outward-looking, progressive thinker of the time. His wife was too. He's kind of had a big idea about Canada's place in the world, a bit of an internationalist, went to the colony of Newfoundland while he was in Canada, did a lot of stuff, and at some point along the line decided, no doubt following in Lord Stanley's footsteps, that he would donate a sports trophy. That this is a great idea, I will donate a trophy. Except he thought he was donating a trophy for hockey. And so he ordered the cup, ordered a cup, and it was going to be donated. The Stanley Cup was already by then going to the professional hockey champions of Canada. So he was going to donate a cup for the amateur hockey champions of Canada. And then a guy named Montague Allen from Montreal, a businessman, philanthropist type, just got in there a little bit ahead of him and said, here we have the Allen Cup, which I will donate. It's still out there. It's donated to, I think, senior hockey, the senior hockey champions. Mm-hmm. So Earl Grey was left with a cup on order and nowhere to send it. And there's some of the stuff that was written around the story. This is where you have to peel back the stuff that may not be entirely true. There's stuff. Oh, he's a great football fan, and he saw people playing football in Ottawa on his daily walks. There's no evidence he ever saw the game.
It's a good story.
That he had any interest in it. He came out of the public school system in England, so presumably he had seen rugby football played, which was essentially what it was back then. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing happened by fluke. And the next part of that is that after that 1909 game, the guys who played in 1909 had no idea they were getting a trophy. That it wasn't ready yet. And the custodians of the cup afterwards got the bill for the engraving and the little base they put it on, and the Governor General didn't cough up. So they had to send him this letter saying, please, Earl Grey, if you would, could you pay this bill?
Nice.
So there you go.
I think we got a shot of that 1909 team. Maybe we could bring it up here. This is a really rugged-looking group of individuals, and there they are. First Grey Cup champs, eh?
Smurl Lawson was the big star, University of Toronto, and I heard it just the other day. I heard an interview with him that he did in the late 1950s. And the funny thing is, they asked him about the first Grey Cup, and he went on about this great game where they played Ottawa and won the Grey Cup. And in fact, that was the game the week before, which was the big game, the kind of Big Four championship or the university championship. The next game, when they played Parkdale in the Grey Cup, was an afterthought. Parkdale was in the ORFU; they were
Ontario
a nothing team, Rugby Football Union, and the crowd that day was half the crowd that they'd had the week before.
Huh, neat. Now, math is not my strongest subject, but I do know that if you've had 100 Grey Cups and they started in 1909, we should have had the 100th anniversary a few years ago.
World War I.
Okay.
So there was a pause. Not World War II, though. They played through World War II with service teams. And in order to kind of keep the morale up on the home front, they had the RCAF Hurricanes, one of the famous teams. Lou Heyman coached them and won a Grey Cup.
Here's another picture we want to bring up here, and no one will be surprised at what they ended up nicknaming this game. Take a look at that. That's the Mud Bowl, Stephen.
Yes.
What a beautiful field that was.
It was a varsity stadium in Toronto. Had a player almost drown. Again, that may not be, maybe not entirely true, but there was a player who was knocked down, maybe knocked out, was face down in the mud and didn't move for a long, long time until his teammates came over and flipped him over. They were worried. They thought he might drown. Mud bowls, fog bowls, ice bowls, wind bowls, and you wouldn't believe how many games where the turf was essentially unplayable, where the players were set out in not much better than that. To play the Grey Cup game. So I know some people don't like dome stadiums, but there's something to be said for dome stadiums.
On the other hand, unlike the Super Bowl, which is almost always played in pristine conditions, either in Miami or New Orleans, under a roof, the weather is, when it's really fun, the weather has been a big issue at Grey Cup time, hasn't it?
It has. The only thing I always say is that as a guy who usually sits in a warm press box, guys like me saying, isn't it great when we're playing the 91 game in Winnipeg when the Argonauts Argonauts beat Calgary in the Grey Cup, the Doug Flutie the Rocket Ishmael game, Matt Dunnigan game. That's the coldest I've ever been anywhere in my life. But I spent that whole game sitting in a toasty press box. Those people in the stands, I don't know how they did it.
There is a story, again, as we look at Grey Cup lore, that when Calgary played in the Grey Cup one year in Toronto, somebody rode a horse through the lobby of the Royal York Hotel to show Stampeder pride.
Yes.
Did that really happen?
We don't know. I got to say, in the course of touring with this book, I spoke in front of an audience in Burlington, Ontario, just right at the very beginning, and I said exactly that. I said this is the 48th is a famous game because the Calgary fans all piled onto trains in Calgary, made the trip east. They brought horses and chuck wagons and musicians and clearly a lot of alcohol. They spilled out at Union Station the day before the game. They went across the street to the Royal York Hotel, which was then the tallest building in the Commonwealth, the headquarters of all of this. They took over the lobby, and there's some great stuff written about them. William French, who became the great culture critic at the Globe and Mail, was then kind of a junior reporter, a cub reporter, and he wrote a description of the Calgary fans in the lobby. It's like Margaret Mead. It's like, who are these people and where do they come from? But the horse part has always been part of the story, and it's unclear. But when I spoke in Burlington, a woman at the back put up her hand and she said, the horse did come in the lobby because I know the person who was on the horse. So there you go. Every year since, somebody rides a horse into a lobby somewhere. That always happens.
As they should. 1957 Grey Cup. A guy named Bibbles Bowell intercepts a pass, starts running for the end zone, and something happens to him.
He is running down the sidelines, again at Varsity Stadium, and it's different in those days because there's a lot of people on the sideline. It's not like it is now where there's just the team and the coaches. There's a big crowd on the sideline, and Ray Bibbles Ball is running down. The Tiger Cats have already won this game effectively. You'll be happy to know.
Hear, hear.
And so this is just kind of the clincher. And he falls, he trips. And immediately there's fingers pointing at the sideline saying, somebody tripped him, somebody tripped him. The referee has no idea what to do. Did you call it a touchdown? Did you mark it there? There's mass confusion while the tripper just blends into the crowd and then moves off and becomes a figure of mystery. You know, who did it? It becomes kind of a detective story for a while. On Bibbles Ball's foot, there was a little splash of shoe polish. So for years they tried to figure it out until the tripper revealed himself.
And he was?
David Humphrey, who became, well, he was a Crown at that point, but he became a judge. He became an Ontario judge, pretty well respected guy, and kind of lived for years off the fact that he was the tripper.
1962, the longest Grey Cup game ever played because?
Fog.
Took 2 days to play it.
Took 2 days to play, although, again, one of the stories about that is I was out in Winnipeg just a little while ago talking to Kenny Plain, who played quarterback for the Bombers, who played in that game against the Ticats, and said, what was it like in the Fog Bowl? And he said, we were fine. So it was okay where we were. But the legend is that they stopped it, not because the players couldn't play. Now, the people in the stands couldn't see very well, but the game was on American television. It was a big deal. First time the Grey Cup had ever been on American TV. And one of the stories is that they were panicked about how it was going to look. So they pulled the plug on the game, started it the next day. No points were scored the next day. Winnipeg beat Hamilton again in that game. Yeah, boo.
1971, maybe the most talented Argonaut team not to win a Grey Cup. What happened?
As they were driving for what would have been the game-winning touchdown against the Calgary Stampeders, a running back named Leon McQuay, famous for making 6, 7, 8 moves before he even hit the hole, dropped the ball. He fell down, dropped the ball, was recovered by Calgary. And that team with Joe Theismann as quarterback of the Argos, again, where I come from, that's almost a national holiday. Where in Hamilton, where I come from, we were pretty darn happy that day because that was a rich, glossy, American star-laden Argo team coached by Leo Cahill, who was a polarizing figure, blew it against the Stampeders that day.
1976. Probably the best catch ever to win a Grey Cup. Yes,
it's a beauty. It's a beauty. Tony Gabriel broke the hearts of the entire province of Saskatchewan. They had won it for the first and only time 10 years before. They were in that game, the Ron Lancaster, George Reed, all of those great Saskatchewan players, and a beautiful long bomb into the end zone right over the shoulder of Tony Gabriel in the last 30 seconds of the game, beat him.
At Exhibition Stadium.
Exhibition Stadium.
Yeah. 1977, talk about the elements, the Ice Bowl. Why was a staple gun so influential in that game?
Well, this is the Olympic Stadium in Montreal, but before they closed the hole in the middle, the donut, they left it open to the elements, and there was a freeze, a thaw, and then a freeze again. And when the players came out onto the artificial turf there, it was literally like a skating rink. They couldn't move. And this is Edmonton versus Montreal, two great teams, long-standing rivalry, a rivalry back in the 50s, another rivalry into the 1970s. But Tony Proudfoot, the late Tony Proudfoot of the Montreal Alouettes, went out on the field and had a bright idea. He saw some guys, I think they were phone company guys, installing lines for the TV for the game, and they had one of those big industrial staple guns. He took off his shoe, fired a bunch of staples into the bottom of the shoe, and realized it gave him traction. The Owls used the staples. They won the game. The Eskimos couldn't. It was like they were skating on the field.
It's a huge up. It was like 41-6 or something.
It was a slaughter because one team couldn't stand up.
One team found a staple gun. 1996, maybe the most fun Grey Cup, certainly in a long time. The Blizzard in Hamilton.
The Blizzard in Hamilton at a bleak time for the league. It was a dark time for the league. The first time the game had been back in Hamilton since 72 when the Ticats won. There hadn't been many Grey Cups that I ever win. There'd only been, I think, one before that. So unusual. Coming back to Hamilton, they had trouble selling seats. Argos with Doug Flutie, Edmonton, Danny McManus, two really good football teams put on an unbelievable show in a blizzard that no one, I don't know what happened to the weather forecasters on that one.
They took the night off.
I know no one saw that one coming.
No.
And but there are people in Edmonton who'll still tell you that there's a Doug Flutie fumble that wasn't called that could have turned the game.
And they would be right.
Yes.
What was the greatest Grey Cup ever played?
89.
You're right.
Well, it was, and but where again, it was the wrong team won. Saskatchewan beat Hamilton, but you know what? That's a funny game because I remember vividly. I remember walking down to it was then still the Sky Dome, and the Saskatchewan people were in town. They always show up. They had a pep rally at Maple Leaf Gardens at which Wendell Clark made one of the speeches, and then the Hamilton crowd came in. Obviously, two great passionate football towns, but outside of that stadium in Toronto, you would have not known a game was going on.
Yeah.
Inside, the best football game I've ever seen in any league. And I've seen a couple.
43-40 for Saskatchewan.
43-40. Dave Ridgway becomes a national hero in Saskatchewan, in the Distinct Society of Saskatchewan by kicking the winning field goal. And Glenn Suter becomes famous just for holding the ball.
That's right. Yeah, that was a wonderful game. Let's do a couple of, I want to finish with some video, but I want to do a couple of trivia questions first.
Oh, good.
Just because
you know how great I am at that.
But these are all in the book, so you should know the answers to these.
Don't.
Which team has won the most Grey Cups?
Well, somebody from Toronto.
That is correct.
Yeah, now they're different versions of Toronto. They're different iterations, right? The U of T and Bombay Beach and the Toronto Argonauts. So.
But even the Argos have won 15 all on their own.
They've won 15 all on their own.
What stadium has hosted the most Grey Cups?
Varsity, I would assume.
Correct, 30. What city won a Grey Cup in every decade of the 20th century?
Every decade of the 20th century.
Brunt, why would I
Hamilton
ask you?
Tiger Cats,
Exactly.
Yeah. I was just trying to make sure they won one. I was trying to remember that 99 game. They just scraped in,
They
didn't
did. Just made it at the end there. Yeah, a Hamilton team.
A Hamilton team. So the Tigers and the Wildcats.
Or the Alerts, actually, even before that. Let's show some video here. This is one of the reasons why this game persists, despite it all. Roll tape, please.
It's a league of ice, of fog, of mud and wind. And for one Sunday in November, it's the nation's glue. This is a league of fast and crush, where there is no safety on the sideline. And everything can change in a blink.
And here's Stephen Brunt now in his book saying the Grey Cup not only endures but thrives as we head deeper into the 21st century. That's why it doesn't just have a glorious, colorful, idiosyncratic past, but also a bright future. This sport, invented more than 150 years ago, and this game, about to be played for the 100th time, are part of what makes us, us. What defines us on this ever-shrinking planet. It's part of what links our Canadian tribe. Whether our families have been in this country for generations or arrived yesterday, the Grey Cup is one of the answers to the ever-tricky question, so what is it that makes you a Canadian? This has turned into more than just a football game, hasn't it?
I think it has. You know, I guess it has been that for a long time. It's been a signpost in our years and in our lives. I think for most of us, even if you're not a football fan, you know, boy, this time of year, it's Grey Cup time. I think that was underappreciated at a certain phase in our history, you know, not that long ago. I think there was a time when the Canadianness of the Grey Cup was regarded as a deficit from some people. People didn't. They wanted something more glossy and bigger and American, and this was kind of a mom and pop operation. It was yesterday's news. Who wants to watch Regina in a football game? I think we're in a different phase right now, and I think because we can access the entire world right here or on a screen, the stuff that makes us us, those things that make us Canadian, I think actually take on a little bit more importance. Who the heck are we in that world? And this is one of them.
Here's the next question, though. Is this something that appeals to old Canada, more rural Canada, whiter Canada, or is this something that has penetrated the more diverse Canada?
You know what? The reason it has penetrated the more diverse Canada is because of the accessibility. Its accessibility as a game you can play. If you look at the diversity of the rosters of Canadian players in the Canadian Football League, you can start playing football at 12, at 15, at 16, at 17, and still become a great football player. You can't do that with hockey. If you're not playing hockey by the time you're 5, if you don't know how to skate, you can't be a hockey player. New Canadians are overrepresented proportionately among the Canadian players in the league, and I think in that sense it's more accessible. It struggles as an attraction in the biggest cities, but it's had a revival in the province of Quebec that actually predated the Owls going back there. It's very strong in the West. And I know there's a nostalgia element to this and an old Canada element to this, but I still think it has legs.
How come? Why does it have legs?
I think the product is really, if you just take it on its own merits and don't sit there and say, well, it's not like this and it's not like that, it's a distinctive game that played only here. But the only people who play this game by these rules are us. And it has great entertainment value. It has great tradition and history, which is worth celebrating in the same way we do with hockey lore. Why not embrace it?
But does that matter to somebody who just came here from Sri Lanka?
I don't know. But if somebody who just came here from Sri Lanka said, what is it all these people are doing the third week of November? I think the answer would be, we're doing what we always do this time of year, which is we watch a football game. And here it is. What do you think?
Well, the guy who's coming up after you is exactly one of the kind of guys you just talked about, because he didn't play football until he was well into his teenage years. He didn't learn it from the time he was 5, so he's an example of what you just talked about. Stephen, it's good of you to come back and visit us at TVO. 100 Grey Cups, This Is Our Game, a beautiful book. Nice job.
Thanks.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.